Good day, Mom Gray. I'm Kay Anatabag and I'm your student from BSED Mathematics 1B. So for this video, I will be discussing about the differences between the primary and the secondary account of a Tejeros Convention. Specifically, the differences between the Memoirs of a General written by Santiago Alvarez and the Revolt of the Masses, which was written by Mr. Teodoro Agasilio. So to start with, let me first share my screen with you, ma'am. See you!
Okay, so welcome Gray. So this is my final output for our task as regards to the primary versus secondary sources of the Heros Convention. Also, indeed, the two books now have their own differences when it comes to some details and events, and sometimes the other book has additional information compared to the other one, but nonetheless, both authors have written them so well, so big clap to that. Well, for the memoirs of a general, it was written and concise, so we were able to read and comprehend it very well since it's direct to the point. And for the revolt of the masses, it was long, but since it was very detailed, we were also able to visualize what is really happening at that very moment, which is also a good thing. So to give you an overview about what I'm going to discuss in this video, ma'am, well, first, we'll talk about the differences of the primary source and the secondary source when it comes to the background of the author. Second, to the date when the account was written. Third, the dates mentioned. Fourth, the places mentioned. Fifth, the key personalities. And lastly, the sequencing of events. But we will not dig deeper about this once, mom, since the main event is waiting for us. But actually, the compiled differences between the two accounts is in the end. So we'll just scan through this, ma'am, quickly and focus on the last one. So first, for the background of the author, as you can see, for the primary source, it was Santiago Alvarez. Meanwhile, for the secondary source, it was Teodoro Agoncillo. While Santiago Alvarez is a revolutionary and Philippine independence military who is also present there during the Tejeros Convention. So he experienced himself firsthand the Tejeros Convention. Meanwhile, Teodoro Agoncillo is a renowned Filipino historian and national scientist who was born in Lamari, Batangas. And he wrote this book after thousands of researches and after giving his viewpoint about the matter. So they differ when it comes to the author. So for the second one, for the date when the account was written, so as you can see, Santiago Alvarez wrote his memoirs in 1927 and published it on July 24, 1927 to April 15, 1928. So meanwhile, the secondary source was written on October 1947 and was published in 1956. So as you could see, the primary account was written and published first before the secondary account, and so they differ in that matter. So for dates mentioned, actually, in the primary account, there are just two main na na-mention it. First is the March 25, 1897, when the assembly at Tejeros happened, and the March 27, 1897, when eyewitnesses who had spied on the proceeding revealed that a meeting had taken place at the Tansa parish house. So as you could see for the secondary account, it was ano, many. There are many dates. Since the author had put some events, some happenings before the convention happened. And the main difference is that, as you can see here, it's March 22, 1897, according to Mr. Chudoro. But for Mr. Alvarez, the convention started or happened last March 25. And as you can see, there are dates before the convention, January 2, April, and January. Obviously, the secondary account was longer. So for the places mentioned, same reason for the above one. As you can see, there are just two here. It's direct to the point. It started directly at during the convention, but for the secondary account, I mean, there are a lot of places since there are also a lot of people involved during the secondary account, and there are a lot of happenings that happened before the convention happened. Okay, so for the key personalities, well, after we have a lot of people involved during the convention, as you can see, there are a set of people in here. And for the next one, and if you compare, you have a long list the primary account code mom, since there are a lot of people involved before, during, and after the convention happened. But we'll discuss it later about the main differences since there are actually people who are present in the primary account who are not present in the secondary account and vice versa. So they differ in that matter. And for the sequencing of events, as you could see, yes, the primary account is actually longer. And the assembly started during the assembly agad-agad. But here, the assembly is still here. And there are a lot of happenings pa that happened before the main event yet. So let's proceed to the differences between the two accounts. Okay, so finally we're already here at the compiled one. The compiled differences between the two accounts between the primary and the secondary sources of the Heros Convention. So first, for the primary source, the events from this book focused more on the election that occurred in the Heros Convention, which is actually true based on what we have discussed earlier before. Well, for the secondary account, the events covered up what happened before the Tejeros Convention ensued. The author mentioned important events that took place before or prior to the said convention. That's why it became longer than the primary account. So second, this account was shorter than the other account and the story was very clear indeed. So this account was long, but the story is clearer and systematized. Yes, even though that it was long, but since it was detailed, it's actually a good thing. You already know what really happened at the very moment, specifically. But we don't know if it's really the truth behind that happenings. And for third one, the author of this account was part of the Magdiwang Council, mentioned it from his own experience. Yes, Santiago Alvarez is part of the Magdiwang Council and he experienced everything firsthand compared to the secondary account, wherein the author of this account was not from any of the council and not part of the real story that happened. But he visited the place where the famous convention happened and even found some things about it, which is actually a very good move. So for the next difference, for the primary account, there was no complete introduction of the positions of both Magdiwang and Magdalo leaders, compared to the secondary account, wherein there was a complete introduction of the Magdalo and Magdiwang leaders written in the first paragraph of the story. Well, actually, the first two pages were just composed of introduction. It's very complete indeed. The secondary account is very complete. And the assembly at the Herald was finally convened on March 20, 1897. This is for the primary account. Meanwhile, for the secondary account, it happened now last March 22, 1897. Well, they actually differ in this manner. It's actually a big difference since it's a date and it's very important. And for the next difference, The story starts on March 25, 1897, in the convention in Tejeros, and there was no further story about what happened before the convention in Tejeros. Meanwhile, for the secondary account, the story starts at the first victory of the rebels, and the story of the primary source was in the middle of this account, and it has further story about what happened before the convention in Tejeros. Yes, which actually supports what we discussed earlier on the table. Well, for the next one, Trining, who is Dr. Jose's sister, and his widow, Josephine, who actually mentioned in the primary account. Meanwhile, nothing is stated about Trining and Josephine on the secondary account, and that's also a major difference between the two sources. Next, there was no description of the state house in Tejeros. Yes, and for the secondary account, since the author has visited the place, he was able to describe the place and put it in the book. Okay, again, in this account for the primary source, General Apoy was insulted by the words of Mr. Montenegro. Again, General Apoy, Mr. Montenegro. But in the secondary account, it was Mr. Santiago Alvarez who got insulted by the words of Mr. Montenegro. And well, who knows what really happened at that time. Next, according to the primary source, the government of the Philippine Republic was established. Meanwhile, for the secondary source, new forms of government determined to take place of the Katipunan, but the author didn't write the specific form of government. Next, for the primary source in this account, General Vibora was the elected Captain General. Again, General Vibora. Meanwhile, for the secondary account, it was Mr. Ricarte, the acting secretary of the convention, who was elected as the Captain General, and that's a big difference between the two sources. And lastly, it wasn't mentioned in the primary account that Andres Bonifacio wrote a letter to his uncle Mariano Alvarez, but in the secondary account, it was mentioned that Bonifacio wrote a letter for his uncle-in-law asking for assistance, asking for help, asking for food, and telling him what's behind the scene, what really happened, why his heart is aching while he is writing the letter. So that's it. I hope that you have enjoyed my discussion, Mom, even though that it's quite long. And I just wish that to see you, Ma'am, soon, hopefully, after COVID ends. Thank you, good ma'am, and fighting to more videos that you're going to watch. Bye bye.
Once again, thank you, good mom, Gray, for giving us this opportunity to discuss the differences between the primary source and the secondary source of the Heroes Convention. I actually really learned a lot and was somehow inspired to rewatch some of our historical movies like Koyong, Batang General, and the Rizal. So I'm very thankful, good mom, for this activity, and I hope to see you soon physically, good mom. Yes, the author of our book. Salute, ma'am. I salute you. Goodbye, ma'am.